The following is a local resident producer's program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
With Dan Rylance, and on this particular edition we're splitting the show in two. On the first half we're very happy to be joined by Roger Jaynes. He is with the Fields of Honor Veterans Military Museum here in Oshkosh. Of course, we've had a military museum for some time in the city. They're looking at building a new one, and we're going to talk about the status of that and where they're at. And then later in the show we'll be joined by two neighbors who are very concerned about the urban deer problem in the city, and they'll share their concerns and thoughts about that issue with us. So for this half, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Cheryl. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for coming.
Well, as I mentioned in the opening, we have had a military museum here for a number of years. I think probably since the 90s, haven't we?
Yeah, the original Military Veterans Museum was started in 1991 by 5 World War II veterans from Neenah, Wisconsin. And they just felt that there should be a proper museum to honor the sacrifices of the men and women who have served both for our way of life and for democracy all these years. And so they had the museum in the city center for a number of years, and we did pretty well with it. I mean, it sufficed, but it was very small. It's only 6,000 square feet. Number one, it allowed us only to show about a third of our vast collection of artifacts and memorabilia. We have a collection that ranges from the Revolutionary War to the present Iraq War, believe it or not.
Wow.
And secondly, there was no room to display vehicles. We now have a total collection, and we can get into that a little later, but of 17 fully restored, beautiful vehicles from the World War II, Korea, Vietnam era, and we also have a T6 trainer, World War II trainer, was donated to us. And thirdly, and probably most importantly, is that we wanted to add to the museum, Foundation did, and make it an educational center as well as just a museum. And that's what we've done. And so in our plans, that will include an educational center that has an enlarged library. It will have an art gallery for both permanent and temporary displays. It will have a 120-seat theater, and it will also have an audio-visual center, and that's where we can really go to work on bringing to life the veterans and who they are, and we think this is the heart of the museum. We've already conducted over 150 interviews in our Living Legacy program, and what this does, it allows the veterans to sit down in front of the cameras and share their stories and experiences, and so that visitors can come in and for generations to come, and they can always relate to these people and what they did and what they went through. Our real dream down the road is to do what EAA did about a year and a half ago. They finally got their Timeless Memories hooked up on their website, so that little Johnny Jones out in Kansas, you know, Mom, Grandpa said he was in the Korean War, you know, I wonder what it was like and everything. Well, you know, Johnny, he did an interview for the Military Veterans Museum. So he can go to our website, click on there, be a button, say interviews, click it on, type in Grandpa's name, and there's Grandpa. And we you know, we've really, I think we've got some pretty innovative ideas, but we want to stress the fact that this museum is to honor the people who served. You know, weapons don't win wars. It's the people who serve that win wars. And that's been our message to this entire thing.
Well, and the Living Legacy program, in and of itself, I think, is very interesting, especially with so many veterans dying off now, like from World War II and so forth. You know, so that's a nice tribute to them, for sure.
We've tried to initially now, of the say 100 and I want to say 60 some interviews, we've really stressed the World War II veterans a lot because we're losing nationwide 1,100 a day.
Right.
But you know, we do have some already from the Korean War and the Vietnam War and the Iraq War, and we're going to just keep working at it and adding to our library. And we want this to be an information destination where students from grade school to university level can come, where scholars can come for historical background. We want to really make this into an information destination that'll attract people from all over the country, not just the state of Wisconsin.
Sure. Well, you were good enough to bring an artist rendering. Why don't we kind of zoom in on that now and take a look at that, and then you can tell us a little bit more about, you know, each of the various things. You've kind of highlighted what you're going to have, and I'm going to let Dan jump in here so I can preserve my voice a little bit. So we're seeing it right now. If you want to just look up at the monitor. So tell us about what we're seeing.
Well, this is the artist rendering of the front of the museum, and sometimes on a flat rendering you can't see it, but it curves, you know, in a circle. The driveway will curve in a circle, and underneath the doors, the front doors there, we're going to have that all wired in with electric and sound, so that when we do our special days, Veterans Day, Memorial Day, Flag Day, these type of things, and when we have our spring and fall reunion, weekend reunions, reenactment reunions, that we can have that for an outdoor ceremony if the weather is nice. Now right in front is our Memorial Plaza. This has been a big part of our fundraising. There will be 6,000 bricks in that Memorial Plaza. And in our information packet and in our brochure, there's information on how, if you have a relative, a friend, it can be yourself if you were the veteran, and you want to purchase, we have 3 different sizes of bricks, and they're not that expensive. I think the most expensive one is $500, but they range, and you can put your message, your name, your date, whatever you want on there, and they've done very well. But when these 6,000 are gone, they're gone. We put it on a limited basis.
What's the cost of a brick?
It ranges, I think, from $150 to $500, depending on the size of the brick and the number of lines. I think it ranges from 3 to 6 lines. Now, these bricks are not just ordinary bricks. They're made out of a special material so that they will last for a long, long time. And the benches you see are, again, to seat people outside, the plaza area itself, where we can put benches and chairs out there, or even put bleachers out there for events. You know, and then as you walk into the main doorway, off to the left would be the administrative offices. The main exhibit hall would be in the center and to the right. We've planned in the rear of the museum. We're on 10 acres, by the way, so we have plenty of room, and there's a nice wooded area back there. And I have to admit, I stole this idea from the Patton Museum down south and kind of modified it. But what we want to do is, when you go past the Medal of Honor Society exhibit and you come out in the back where the woods are, every 50 feet we want to have an obelisk there with a bronze plaque honoring a Wisconsin veteran who received the Medal of Honor. Now, at the Patton Museum, every 50 feet you see one of those, and it's honoring one of the divisions of 3rd Army. 67 Wisconsin veterans have been awarded the nation's highest decoration. And we want to, when we do open, have ceremonies honoring the first 3, and then every Memorial Day, Veterans Day, maybe 4th of July, whatever, you know, we'll add another one. And this way continue to increase our Heroes Walk with information. And we've been working with Doug LaVallette from the Medal of Honor Society, and he's really excited about it. And at the very center back there, we're going to have like a gazebo-like structure where all 67 names will be on it, and there'll be plenty of room if any more. We hope there aren't, but if any more are added. And we really want to pay tribute to those people. So that's sort of an inside-outside look.
Where is this located for some of our viewers?
Okay, this is going to be located about 1/2 mile south of the EA grounds, right on Poberezny Road, where the 41 and 26 exit is, or Plainview is. If you come off to the right and get on Poberezny, we're like 300 yards to the north overlooking 41. It's in a great spot. I mean, it's very visible, and it's just a beautiful area there, like I say, with the woods in the back and everything.
Who owns the land and who will own the museum?
The land was donated to us by Gabert and Roche. It's 10 acres. The foundation, the MVM Foundation, owns the land. The MVM Foundation will own the museum. Okay. There are actually two arms involved in this. One is the museum board, which runs the day-to-day operations of the museum right now, and the other one is the foundation, which is responsible for raising the monies to build the new museum. And that's where I was brought in to be the director of fundraising and public communications.
You mentioned that you have a lot of artifacts already that you've collected. You know, one of the big costs of museums is the curator, the preservation person, changing display. You'll need a fairly large annual operating budget, won't you, to run this?
I think it's probably initially not going to be as much as it will be, say, 5 or 6 years down the line. Okay. But I do agree with you that, and I'll tell you another reason why. Not only because of the collections and taking care of them and initially building the displays and these sort of things, and we want to have an overall plan for this. We do not want to put it piecemeal. We want to sit down and say, okay, look, we want to take this type of a design and do this and that, and that's going to be the executive director who hasn't been named yet, the curator who we haven't brought on board. We feel it's too early to bring them on board. Yeah. But once we get to that stage, we want to have a good overall design. Now, incorporated into that, we want to have hands-on exhibits. And these will change from time to time. And so at that time, yeah, we're going to have to enlarge our staff. I mean, I was at EAA for 4 years as executive vice president for corporate communications, and the museum's restoration staff was fairly big. But that comes with growing. But what we want to do is have these hands-on exhibits where maybe when the school group comes through, the child walks up and he stands there and we click a switch and he feels how heavy a full pack is with all the stuff on it. Or maybe we have a trays out and we have soda for them and we let them eat those delicious K rations that our boys and women all had to eat when they were overseas. Maybe, you know, with our vehicles, we're not going to have everything roped off. You know, if someone wants to sit in a Jeep and do the thing with the wheel or that, fine. If something breaks, we'll fix it. But we want it to be hands-on. One of the big displays we're going to have, we have already in our possession one of the very last Higgins boats that took part in the Normandy invasion. And the U.S. Navy was kind enough to help us and renovate this so that it's now looks exactly like it did in its prime. And we want the kids to go up there and sit in the coxswain seat, and we want them to see what this was like. We just have so many of these things that we want to incorporate. Obviously there'll be weapons displays, obviously there'll be uniform displays. We'll probably split things off into, for the World War II area, the European and Pacific theater, the Korean War area, the Vietnam era, you know, and the modern day. But we want to have a plan. That's really, right now we're at the bricks and mortar stage. Once we get past the bricks and mortar, you know, then we're going to go into that plan, and that's when we'll be starting to name people to come in as at these various positions. I think the really important thing is that we just don't try to move too fast. I would rather take it a little slower and make sure that when we do it, we do it right. We want this to be a quality facility that really attracts people.
Well, I think it's nice that, you know, that kids or adults too, for that matter, will be able to, you know, actually be interactive with some of these vehicles. That's one of the nice things about Red Arrow Park. You know, you can't in the summer drive by there and not see at least a couple of kids on any given day of the week climbing on the tanks and so forth over there. And so I think that's really quite a nice added feature to it. Now, you have not broken ground yet,
No, we have not.
When do you anticipate breaking ground? Because I think initially you were looking at it last year.
We were. It really, Cheryl, it all depends on how fast the money comes in. I've heard two theories on this. One is, don't break ground until you have all the money in. The other one is, once you break ground, you reach a certain percentage and you break ground, then it's like a domino effect in the money, because then you're not, you know, right now we're selling a dream. But once you start breaking ground, you're selling a reality. And that seems to really, I feel that's the way to go. Now our foundation board, and I think they were very wise in this, just determined that we would have to reach a certain level, and we're about $1.2 million from that level. We've got 2.2, we have another $1.2 million. But when we reach that level, then they would feel comfortable we should break ground. And I think they're very wise in doing it that way. The last thing you want to do is overextend yourself. You want to make sure that you've got your ducks in order, as they would say. Right. And I think, given the people who are on our foundation board, I think that's going to happen.
Sure.
Who's on your foundation board, and how would you get on a foundation board? Is this a private thing that I mean, well, people apply? Or?
I came on board 3 years ago, and basically, if there's a vacancy, the board members meet and decide on candidates and people that they would like to add to the board. Same goes for the museum board as well. But we feel very good about the fact that, you know, Bob Stevenson from Appleton is the president of the foundation board. He has a very steady hand over things. He's very, very good at kind of keeping everybody going in the right direction. We had Tom Bold, Denny Lamers from McMahon and Associates, Fritz Ganther, who's retired now, but Ganther Construction is well known. He's a very successful businessman. Steve Toney is our attorney, very successful fellow. We've been very fortunate in having a lot of very good quality people on that foundation board, and I think that's going to continue. And I think that's going to be the key to success.
Now, how much is the total project? You said you've raised about $2.2 million right now. You need about another $1.2 million to go before you break ground. How much is the total project?
Probably the whole process. And I should preface this by saying we're going to break ground on phase 1 and then phase 2. It's a 45,000 square foot facility. Phase 1 will be 25,000 square feet. This will be the main exhibit area and probably almost 3/4 of the educational center. The second 20,000, phase 2, the 20,000 square foot part, is going to be more for additional things like we plan to have. We've already contacted, and I can't name them, but there are a number of military related organizations that want to have their offices in our museum. And so we would, and this would be a source of income for us.
Sure.
And then we will also have banquet rooms for veterans groups, for corporate and private events, things like this. There'll be a catering facility there. There's a lot of these things, but those things are secondary. The first thing we want to do is get phase 1 done and have the museum there. We'll probably, you know, we obviously will charge admission, probably, I'm guessing, at about the same level that EAA does. And then, you know, when you're looking at income, you've got admissions, you got your donations are the big thing, and even after you get your whole facility built, you want to still work on an endowment fund. And then the rentals I was talking about with the various companies. Now, the whole total project, I think, is in both phases, and this would be over probably, I would guess, a 6-year period, would probably run to about $7 to $8 million. That's my best ballpark figure I can give based on the figures that Bolt Construction is giving us, and they're going to do the construction of the facility. Oscar and Tom Bolt have been Oscar was a navigator and a B-24 Liberator in World War II. He's been very active in helping us, and Tom has too. I just feel that, you know, you kind of got to take, I say, the baby steps because you want to do it right. And that's what we want to do.
Sure. Go ahead.
Are you competing a little bit with the City Museum, which has now announced plans, at least sort of, to start a $10 million fundraising thing?
I don't feel we are because, you know, our whole focus is on the veterans, on Wisconsin's veterans and what they've done. They're more general. And the same thing with EAA. Very early on, our people talked with Tom Poberezny, and of course I said I worked there for 4 years. And that was the one thing. He had no problem with us being that close to them as long as we didn't start an aircraft museum, you know, because they've got one there, and a very good one, I might add. But, and that's why we're trying to really make sure we don't do that. What we want to do is work with the other museums. When I was at EAA for about a 6 to 8 month period, we didn't have a director, and I was put in charge of getting new displays and exhibits and things. And also I worked up a program where I worked with the Maritime Museum, the National Railroad Museum, the Circus Museum. You know, and what we did is we had a interactive thing where you walked into our museum, you saw what you wanted to see. When you came out, we had a nice kiosk there and said, "So, you like airplanes? How about trains and submarines?" And we had their brochures there. And we also had back and forth discount coupons that we worked. The people, you know, the one thing I found out is people who like to go to museums like to go to museums. And the PR director at the Manitowoc Museum, she said, you know, we see some of the same families coming back about every second or third year to see what's new. And that's why I say, ever changing the exhibits. You cannot remain static. You've got to always have some new things coming in there. And I think Adam Smith at EAA, by the way, has done a great job with this, bringing in more and more new things into that museum. You've got new attractions, especially ones that attract the kids. I think that's very important.
Is there a, this is maybe for to ask a fundraiser is not really fair, but you know, there's a certain glorification of the military and a certain anti, if you're not for the wars, you're un-American. I'm not saying this very well, but let's say you had some dissenters from the Vietnam War or veterans from the Vietnam War who came back and had really critical things to say about that. What are the chances of those veterans and those experiences being in this museum?
I don't think we would make them the ¡1 stage show, as you would call it, or the #1 display, but I can't imagine that we might not have an exhibit that said their side of the story as well.
I'd hope so, but the criticalness of wars is generally, you know, kind of out of bounds for military. I mean, you want to honor it in a positive sense, and patriotism in most military museums is pro for the involvement and less on criticalness
Well,
of the involvement.
I think you got to realize, and I'm not trying to put down the people who maybe came back from, say, Vietnam and had a bad experience, because there was a number of them that did. And part of it was just when they came back that the general public was against the war, so, you know. But our whole focus is, here are these men and women who have left families behind, taken away from their daily lives, 2, 3 years at a time. In World War II, I mean, my father served for 5 years, first in the Pacific and then over to Normandy and in Europe. And I think, and this is my own opinion, that it's more important to honor those people for what they did, because without those people, we might be saying Sig Heil today. The minute that a country loses its will to defend democracy, it will not have a democracy. That is a...
But dissent is part of democracy.
It is. Huh? Dissent is a big part of democracy if it's done in the proper manner. And I'm not against dissent. I mean, I was just one of the very lucky ones during the Vietnam War, in that I had one of the lucky numbers so that I didn't get taken over. And I was in the middle of my college and that, and we had dissenters at the University of Iowa. They were going to block the doors and do all this, but I was paying my money, or my folks' money, and I had a scholarship too, but I wanted to go in and get my education, and I decided I'm going in and get my education. You can do what you want out here, but I'm going to get my education. So it's all on whose ox is being gored here. I don't think that dissension is wrong. I really don't think that a lot of military men think dissension is wrong. It's when the dissenters become the aggressors, you know. I don't know, but we're getting kind of off the...
I'm going to proceed. Just my father and my father-in-law both were North Dakota farm boys who served in World War II. Okay, they came back, and my father-in-law was a teetotaler, so he didn't join the American Legion because they drank too much, and my father didn't join the American Legion because he thought they bragged too much. Now these were servicemen right after the war, but until they died, neither my father-in-law nor my father ever once talked about their experiences in World War II.
And that's perfectly within their right.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is when you leave something after close to it, you don't do it. But now, like you said, there's so few and as you get older, you want to reminisce because you're near the end of reminiscing. So there's a change. But for many veterans right after World War II, it was never discussed.
My father said very little about it. He had some funny stories, you know, a few funny stories. But the thing was, you know, he never talked about a lot of things and that I didn't find out till later. I mean, if you're ever on a detail that goes out and picks up your friends off the battlefield after they've been killed, and he never, and this was one thing in that movie To Hell and Back, Audie Murphy's story, that they pushed big time. The older guys that had been there serving, they never became friends with the young 18-year-olds coming in because they were more likely to get killed than anybody else because it took a while to learn the ropes. And they showed in that movie the different things that would happen, and that's why they didn't do that. And my dad was very much that way, and that the young kids, there was a certain cadre in his platoon of the older guys, and they, you know, they just kind of stuck together and they knew what was going on. And but he didn't talk about a lot of things. He had one good funny story. They were nearing the German border, and somebody had found out that across this one field there was a woods, and behind that there was a few mountains there, and they said there's a wine cellar in there. So naturally my dad, who had just been promoted, he'd been a private all through his military, so he was PFC, private first class. So he and his buddy took off across the field with empty packs. So they got over there and they went in the woods a little ways and looked around, and sure enough, here was this cave and there was wine in their wine cellar. So they load up their packs and they're coming back. Well, about halfway coming back across the field, the German mortars opened up and they're running like crazy to get back to their foxholes. So my dad's running along, and all of a sudden he felt this smack in his back, you know, and this liquid, and he's like, oh my God, I've been hit. And he jumped in his foxhole and he said, medic, medic, medic. And these guys are standing there laughing at him. He said, what the hell are you all laughing about? And what had happened is a piece of shrapnel hit one of the wine bottles and broke it up. Now those are the kind of things he would tell me about. But the serious, the real serious things, you know, some of them later on in his life he did, but he really didn't. And
I think a lot of them wanted to forget it.
Well, and the nightmares, you know. I mean, Mother used to say he'd have nightmares there. When they had the Falkland Islands War was on, they had a picture on cover of Time magazine of two young British soldiers with a machine gun at a barrier or something down in the Falkland Islands. And my dad started having nightmares because what had turned out was once when they were going down the road, they were riding on the tanks and walking and all this, and the Messerschmitts came down to strafe them. And these two young kids who were a .30 caliber machine gun unit, the two kids, one shot and one loaded, they just took that extra second to look up rather than just diving for the ditch. And those Messerschmitts had 20 millimeter cannons in their noses as well as machine guns that killed them both. My dad never forgot that. So. Anyway.
Well, thank you so much for being here. We're out of time, unfortunately. But for people who want to donate to the museum,
I was just going to ask that.
We've been putting up your website address throughout the show, and they're accepting both donations, financial donations, or artifacts. So you can contact them for more information on how to do that. So
we have a donor number, and it's 920-470-VETS, V-E-T-S. And that's 8387 on the keyboard, and they can call there. Yes, it can be a cash donation. It can be an in-kind donation. We've even had some people who have stocks and bonds. They've signed them over to the museum. And the other thing is the artifacts. I tell people all the time, don't throw these things away.
All right, very good. Thanks so much for being here.
Cheryl, Dan,
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you both.
We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, we'll be discussing urban deer issues here in the city. We'll be right back.
We just escaped.
I escaped.
I escaped.
By foot?
And ran across the border.
I couldn't practice my religion.
I was put to work in forced labor camps.
If I stay in Cuba, I would have been dead by now.
If you think differently, then you're an enemy.
If you know how to read and write, you're dead. You speak your mind, you're dead.
The only way to express what I wanted to do was to get out.
I got to the country when I was about 14 years old.
I was 20.
I was 24.
I came here with nothing. No money, no English.
America stood for freedom, it stands for freedom, and that's what all my generation, young generation, wanted to be there.
For the first time, I felt like I have a right to be on this earth.
Here, you can do whatever you want to do.
I love my life here. I feel at home.
I'm free to do what I want.
Freedom to me means my life.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Poor nutrition today will increase Sarah's chances of anemia, add to her healthcare costs, sick days, even stunt her ability to learn. And the thing is, Sarah's not even born yet. Get proper nutrition before it's too late. Call or visit WIC. WIC provides nutrition information, healthcare referrals, even food. Your child has you, and you have WIC.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. We're very pleased to be joined now by Teresa Duran to my left and also Linda Grant. They are both residents of the Huntington Downs area, correct? Okay. And they've got some concerns, as do a fair amount of neighbors, I understand, about urban deer issues and some of the destruction that the deer are causing to their property and so forth. I should say that the Chief of Police, Scott Groyle, has been kind of appointed by the acting city manager, John Fitzpatrick, to sort of spearhead this effort. He was going to be on tonight, however, he could not make it. We'll have him on a little bit later date, probably after he's doing a workshop with the council on the 25th, I think, and so he'll be on after that. So he'll tell us
and this
things.
show would play one day before that common council.
No, it
no,
won't.
It won't. Okay,
Yeah,
so it'll be after. Okay.
So anyway, but you know, we'll have him on after the workshop and you know, hear things from his perspective. So thanks very much for being here.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess let's get a little background on this issue first. How long have you two lived in the Huntington Downs area? Let's start there.
I've lived there for more than 30 years.
Okay.
I moved there 5 years ago this summer.
Okay. And has this been becoming a progressively worse problem, and when did it start?
Yes, progressively worse. When we moved there 5 years ago, we would see a deer occasionally early morning, at night, and it was neat. Oh, look at the deer. Starting about 3 years ago, and particularly the last year, you can see deer in our neighborhood virtually any time of the day. Not one, not two. My neighbors have taken pictures in the middle of the day, 7 or 8, coming out of the woods around the armory. So it is getting increasingly worse, and they are becoming, they just don't fear humans. You know, they're becoming more brazen all the time.
One neighbor had 12 in her backyard at one time. Another neighbor had 8 underneath her bird feeder, so they're in numbers in small areas.
So for someone who's lived there 30 years, you've seen the population increase?
Yes.
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 What is it, from your perspective, that is making the population increase?
From my perspective, 3 things.
Okay.
One is there aren't any predators. Right? We've eliminated predators. They have no predators. The second thing is we've taken hunting out of the mix, have we not? I mean, we're here in the city of Oshkosh. The third issue is we have people feeding them, supplementing, giving them corn and feeding them. Deer populations will grow at 1.5 times the herd size every year. So what's happening is they're just doing what they're sort of naturally going to do, and so the population is increasing, and there aren't any natural ways for that population to be culled.
Well, how many deer, now this was a question that one of you had actually sent to us that you wanted to discuss. How many deer can the area support? In other words, the number of deer per acre according to DNR standards.
Well, the DNR, as you know, they manage the deer in the state of Wisconsin, and they come up with things called
deer management units.
management units. And what we discovered in the Wisconsin code, administrative code, is they have established they have metro management units. Now they don't have one for Oshkosh, but Green Bay, Hudson, La Crosse, Superior, Madison. And the density that they're looking at for those areas is 10 deer per square mile. Now, if you take the acreage from Vulcan Quarry, the Armory Woods, the 2 parcels next to it, put that together, how many, about 125 acres total? And that
well, the quarry is 126 acres, the woods is 51 acres, so it's technically, if you do the math, you should have 2.8 deer in that entire area.
160 acres would be a quarter mile squared.
Right. So 640 acres is a square mile.
640 is a square mile.
Right.
And if you look at the quarry, if you look at the aerial picture of the quarry and realize how much of the quarry has no vegetation, I mean, it's even, it really is even less.
Rock.
The carrying number would even be less.
Right.
So if you figure 40 and there's only supposed to be 2.8.
How many deer do you think are in there?
We hear, and the estimations, and this was confirmed today, the meeting with the police chief. We've heard the Armory folks say this, that they estimate that deer herd to be somewhere between, and the Vulcan Quarry has confirmed this as well in meetings, verbally, 35 to 40 deer. And, you know, the DNR, or people will say, well, these are just goals. Well, you need to have some number to go by, and this is in the code, and this is what they're establishing as deer management, so we feel like, well, these are numbers you're establishing, why don't we use them?
If you look at the deer management unit and what it is they base it on, the area that's there isn't even conducive to it. I mean, they look at swamp and open areas for them to be in, so where they're at would be even less, I would suppose, than 10 per square mile.
Some of the people on, I've seen this on the Oshkosh Northwestern's discussion board, you know, they have said, oh, there's no way that there's 35 deer out there. And I mean, I guess I don't know how people are really counting these deer unless they're all in one spot at the same time. How are people counting them?
I've counted 15 at one time in the empty lot, which is bordered by Osborne and Mason.
Okay.
I personally counted 22 one night last fall, just driving by, not intentionally going out saying, I'm going to do a deer count tonight, you know, in my car with my family. And we all counted, drove back down, counted again. 22.
And where was that, Teresa?
On Osborne.
Okay, so like coming from
South
Park down to probably the frontage road.
Correct. Down to about U.S. Bank, right there where the quarry ends. 22.
And what is it about the Vulcan Quarry area that seems to be attracting them?
Well, they're fenced in.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know that they're attracted there. They just, that's where they ended up, and they fenced them in, and that's where they've stayed. They do jump. People have seen them jump from one side to the other. I don't know how often that occurs, but they do jump.
And what's Vulcan Quarry saying about this?
Evidently, at the meeting they had last week, they are saying that they are going to be cooperative, that whatever we need, they will agree to, which is, in my estimation, a change in direction. But they had the corporate people here, and unfortunately I think there are going to be some roadblocks because they have a lot of issues, and people have to be trained in order to know how to work within the confines of the quarry. So I don't know how that's going to all work out.
Okay.
What are your health concerns about the deer population?
Our health concerns are, you know, they're not our primary concerns, but they're part of our concerns, is that with that many deer in an area, it has been shown that there would be an increase in Lyme's disease. I would love to take either one of you for a walk around my yard and the back of my yard and show you all of the deer scat. It's incredible, the amount of deer feces that is everywhere. And, you know, I am unsure of what diseases can come from that, but it's unsanitary. I mean, I can't imagine this is a good thing.
Besides, it's a residential house. You don't
correct.
Have to, I mean,
right. Yeah, right. I'm not living in the country.
Destruction of property or shrubs and stuff, you mentioned that. That's another issue for you people?
Initially, when we addressed the council, my concern was the article in the paper indicated that it was a winter problem, and I said that's absolutely not true. Because my damage, I don't have the same kind of landscaping that Teresa has, so I'm really not experiencing the damage she is in the winter, but I experience it the same as she does in the summer. I mean, I have a garden, a vegetable garden, and I've got it completely fenced so that rabbits don't get in, but they will jump completely over the fence and stand in the middle of my garden, and they ate it. So it's, what I said to the council was, it's a quality of life issue, because I moved there. It's a beautiful area. I love to garden, but it's a waste of time, energy, and money.
What would you like the solution to be, and who will make the decisions to handle your solutions or other things? Where are we at on this? What would you people like first?
What I would like is a culling of the deer.
Okay.
There is an overpopulation issue. Okay. Again, no natural predators, they can't be hunted, and people are feeding them.
And you're going to increase, as you said, you got 35 now, you multiply it by times 1.5.
Right, they're predicting there could be an additional 20 by next winter.
Yeah.
So I think there are really three things that need to happen, in my opinion. One is there needs to be a lethal reduction of the herd. Lethal means sharpshooting. The second thing that needs to happen, and needs to happen immediately, in my opinion, is there needs to be a ban on feeding the deer, an enforced ban. We have neighbors feeding them corn. And, you know, so the deer are learning to walk through the neighborhood to get the corn, and on the way, we'll have some other things to eat. And so I think, you know, the neighbors are well-intentioned, right? But what they don't realize is they're kind of signing the death certificate for these deer, because I don't know how you untrain a deer. They're not, you know, trainable animals. And the third thing I think that we can do as neighbors, and we're willing to do this, is that we will try as best we can to not plant palatable plants, use deer repellents like I did 3 years ago. To some extent that was effective when there wasn't this huge overpopulation. You could keep them away. You had some minor damage, and I think I can live with minor damage. I cannot live with, 30-foot trees that are browsed up 6 feet, that I can't have a vegetable garden, that I can't raise vegetables to supplement my food for my family in the summer. That's to me insane. It's absurd. And so those are in that order. I think is a reasonable approach. Now, the other thing you should realize is that it's not going to just happen, 1 year. If the deer are not eliminated, so every 3 or 4 years, you're going to have to come back to bringing the herd population down.
Okay, now, obviously you've been in communication and you've gone to meetings with city people.
Yes.
Are they receptive to these ideas, and where are they at in terms of doing anything?
I think they're receptive, and I guess I'm really happy with what they've done to this point, figuring that we just presented this problem really to the council maybe 2 months ago, and we've come this far. I get a little impatient with the political approach, but I do think that they're really doing as best as they can. One of the comments that I had to some of the comments that were made by people saying that they enjoy seeing the deer is that I would hope that I would be a good enough neighbor, that I would not insist on my right to see the deer if I knew that she was experiencing $10,000 worth of damage to her landscaping. I mean, I'd like them to have them in their backyard and then see how they feel. And that was part of my problem. We were watching the PowerPoint presentation by the chief of police while we were waiting, and they're keying in on this survey, the numbers. That's the numbers, the numbers, the numbers. And they put the survey out to such an extent that there are people that are absolutely not affected by it. And so I think the numbers have been diluted by people that really shouldn't be giving an opinion.
Are they broadening the area to allow for more deer? Is that?
I don't think they.
They're waiting to experience the more penetration of the deer, and then they put together a map of, you really can't see this here, but the areas here in pink, and you'll see that the chief, when he presents that, where they then, at really Linda's insistence, said, I'll do it myself if I have to, map where the people indicated they had damage, map it. And when you look at that map, you go, oh, it's our neighborhood. It's where the deer are moving, you know, out enough, eating, going back in. You know, they're not, you know, going all the way down to 9th and back. You know, they're penetrating neighborhoods to a certain extent, I think to the extent they have to right now to find food, what their population is dictating. If this problem isn't dealt with, they will continue to move further in their search for more food.
Linda, you had mentioned $10,000 worth of damage. Is that an accurate number, or was that just a number that you had kind of
I'm not remembering. How much did the Armory?
There's a gentleman.
Was in the thousands.
There's a gentleman behind my house who has 34 arborvitae. You know, the tall, kind of lanky trees. They're 10 to 15 feet high. They are browsed, and they're only about this wide. They're browsed up to 6 feet. So he has to take them out. Now, conservatively, if you put $100 on a tree, and you know it'll be more, it's more than that. I think a better number is probably 200.
Sure.
So do the math on that. I have myself about 4 large 30-foot trees that have been there a long time that have been browsed up. Will I replace them? No. I guess I'll do my best to limb them up, and you know they'll look like big morel mushrooms, I guess. And you know,
do you have flower beds and perennials and stuff too?
We do.
We did.
Yes.
Yeah. And those are not cheap either.
I got netting last year, and I would go out every night and cover my plants and go out and bring the netting in the morning. You know, and after 2 months of that, you get kind of tired. Or if you miss one night, it'll be gone.
And it literally happens overnight. I had hostas that were, you know, planted at my house when I bought it, all along the front of my house. One night I went to bed, they were there. The next morning I came out, literally 15 plants chewed down to nothing. Bunnies can't, you know, it's not, you know, it would have been a herd of bunnies to do that kind of damage.
Well, and then, you know, we have the other factor of not just property damage and so forth, but deer accidents, you know. Have there been any so far that you're aware of?
I think the chief said that there were 10 this year on Osborne. I think
10 that were reported.
Yeah.
Does this have to go through the bureaucracy of, did it have to go to the council? Do you need a deer ban ordinance? Or, I mean, where is?
I don't think it's a deer ban ordinance. What you need to have is there's a ban on shooting, and you can't do anything. So and that's why when I said to the council, we need your help because there's nothing we can do. We are powerless over this problem. So they have to either allow sharpshooters to come in to do that. So that will take action by the council.
Even if the police were to go in to do it, they would have to somehow modify that ban.
Right.
Correct. They have to pass an ordinance.
The police won't do it.
And they have to get a permit from the DNR. They have to go to the DNR.
So this is going to go public pretty soon, both with the chief's presentation and I assume discussion agenda on the Common Council meeting. So you will probably have some friends and some foes.
How did we talked a little bit about this before we went on the air, but how did the chief come to get involved in this as opposed to the parks director or someone from the DNR, from the deer management unit or what have you?
I think he was one of the reasons was because his department will be involved with the final solution. And so I think that was one of the reasons. And the other one was Lynn Lawrenson, who's the acting city attorney, and they had legal issues that had to be cleared. And I don't know if there was anyone else. Those are the only 2 people I've ever met with.
The park director was involved in creating the survey, and I think he is a part of the committee that was established. But the chief has really been acting as a facilitator of getting neighbors together with other, you know, the DNR and Vulcan, and he has been facilitating those discussions. And you know, and I would say he's done a good job.
Community policing, I guess, includes here, huh?
Yeah,
I mean,
and I think
that's his agenda.
I think you're right. That's how he approaches it.
That's good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
You know, we've had a big geese problem in this city for a number of years in the parks. They put a ban on feeding the geese into effect. I don't know that really did a whole lot, and I think they've probably tried some other things too to kind of eradicate them from the parks. Do you think that this, whatever they come up with, will be successful, more successful than getting rid of the geese?
Well, I think it's going to be successful. I think they have history with other communities. Middleton, Wisconsin is one, and I know Kohler's had a problem. I don't remember some of the other names, but the chief has been in contact with those people, and I mean, they do it almost on a yearly basis. So I think they have some experience with other people who have already done it. So I certainly expect success.
Okay.
This is not, I know it sort of feels unique because it's just happening here now, but it is not a unique situation to Wisconsin. It is not even unique to this country. That this is going on all over the United States, of having to deal with overpopulation of deer for the reasons that we've already talked about. So there's lots of really good models that they can look at, and I think they've done a pretty good job of really talking to many different people across the state and country about what's the best way. You know, don't recreate the wheel. What's the best way to approach this? What are some model programs?
What have you found as far as model programs, if any? What are other communities doing with the same problem?
Really, it's that I have seen. It's really a couple of things: the ban on feeding, and the culling of the deer population. And you know, a there almost always is a committee. There's community involvement, but the two things that are the most common to all the areas that I've looked at have been the ban on feeding and the periodic culling of the deer. When the population gets too high, you bring them down.
How much time have you people spent on this? A lot?
I know more about deer than I ever wanted to.
But you know, this is community involvement. This is we need more of that. And do you have a name? Do you have an organization?
No,
or do I dare ask that? Or no? You just sort of informally, just neighbors trying to
We just started calling and decided that we were going to approach the council in citizen statements, and everything has come from that. I think we had about 8 people that night. One thing that I wanted to mention in my reading, talking about Middleton, Wisconsin, one of the biggest things they said was, do not feed them, and if you have one neighbor who does, it will create a problem for the entire neighborhood. And now we know of at least 2 in our neighborhood who have been feeding them. So
some people are really adamant that they
want
to feed.
I know, and you know, I guess one of the points that I'd also like to try to make is that there are a lot of neighbors that I've spoken to who really love that woods back there and the nature, you know, back there. And one of the points that I try to make to them is that by having too many deer there, you are not going to have any diversity of nature back there, because that overpopulation of deer is going to browse everything down. So you'll have a real lack of songbirds, of mammals, of amphibians. I mean, it'll be a deer park, and that's it. So you really, the deer are reducing the amount of diversity that can be back there. I've seen fox back there, pheasants. I haven't seen them lately. So if you really are interested in having a really neat nature area back there and a nice woods, you want a woods with a little diversity, not just 30 deer back there.
This would be a great study for someone to have a sort of a balanced ecological thing back there, and maybe get school children involved in some groups. And you know, here's the optimum ecology we want for this area. I think it'd be a great project for somebody.
The problem is, and I guess I didn't realize this, the biggest parcel back there is owned by the Air National Guard, Wisconsin National Guard, and they use that woods for training purposes, which I didn't know. So a lot of that is off limits to, you know, most of us.
Okay. You know, you were mentioning, Teresa, about deer feces. And I know we've had a big problem with rabbits this year, just rabbit droppings everywhere. I've got to imagine that with that kind of deer population in your yard, it's a huge mess. Do you have children, or Linda, do you have
No, but I have dogs.
Dogs?
I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and if I took you back to the line of my backyard back there, it's
well,
disgusting.
they can't go out in the yard and play. You know, without stepping in it.
Well, they do. You know,
but they're stepping in it. And even if there's not Lyme disease there, that's, as you mentioned, it's just plain unsanitary.
Right.
Not to mention messy. So
I had a neighbor say to me, he took his dog recently who didn't have any worms into the vet, and the vet said, "Your dog now has worms." And he was like, you know, and they said, "Deer feces in your yard?" And that's the kind of worm. You know, I'm hoping that doesn't happen to any humans, but that certainly was an outcome for one of our neighbor's dogs.
One more thing for Linda to worry about now.
Part of the education process, I think, a lot of people are asking, why can't you anesthetize the deer and move them? Which is the DNR will not allow it. With chronic wasting disease, they have a policy that you cannot move the deer anywhere. So, you know, for all those people who would want to do that, that's the reason.
And who would want, you know, where would you take them? There are 1.2 million deer in the state of Wisconsin. There's really no place for them.
If they're not our problem, they're someone else's.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, I suspect that if they approve sharpshooters coming in, there's going to be some outrage about this. I mean, we're already seeing some of the letters to the editor about, oh, you know, it's beautiful to see these deer, and I agree, it's probably beautiful to see deer, but, you know, when you couple that with the problems that they bring in your yards, that's not such a beautiful thing.
Wait till they're in your backyard, because I used to be really excited about it, because I'm a city girl, and I didn't see deer, and I actually went out in my front yard as they were standing on the sidewalk to try to scare them around the side so they wouldn't get hit on 9th Avenue. And that was back in my day when I didn't understand what was happening, and that was probably about 4 years ago. And about 3 years ago was when the damage really started to become noticeable.
Okay.
I used to see a deer footprint every once in a while in my garden in the spring, but not anymore. And wait till they have. People just have to understand that they're not in their backyards, but they are in ours.
Have they been seen in any other sections of town?
I believe at the council meeting, didn't Paul Esselner talk about hearing him out over by the past the airport, over in that area, over there. So, but
I've heard of 2 that were on West Haven Drive. My daughter lives over on across from South Park, and she's seen them walk over there. So I'm not sure exactly where they're coming from, but
okay. Well, I know about 4 years ago, I happened to, when I lived in the downtown area, I happened to see one, you know, in my neighborhood at that point. I think that was probably just a freak thing, though, a deer who probably just got misplaced from you know, where he or she should have been.
We had one in Miller's Bay 2 summers ago, and that was just a freak thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Because there isn't, you know, I mean, you have to think about that area that we live at. You know, there are those parcels that they can go back into.
Exactly.
They can come out and then they can go back in, and that I think that's pretty.
It's different, isn't it?
It's different than the rest of the city.
Okay.
I think we have a unique situation where we are, because they're bounded on all sides.
Yeah. Sure.
And I'm not so sure that in all of the other communities that are facing the urban deer issue, that they don't have you know, at least one way out. They may have a place where they're more comfortable. How are they going to get out? And as the DNR said to me, as long as they have something to eat, they're not going to leave.
Sure. All right. Well, we will be anxiously awaiting to see what happens here. So thanks very much to both of you for being here.
Thank you very much for coming.
And good luck.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.